To harvest a good crop, sweet potatoes need a growing season of between 90 and 120 days, depending on the variety. My favorite choice is Beauregard, which matures in 90 days. So, if we have a colder than average spring, there is still enough time for a sizable harvest. Georgia Jet is another variety that matures in 90 days and Centennial in 100. Bush Puerto Rico takes a little longer to mature 110 days, but is a more compact variety for smaller gardens and containers. All of these varieties have dark orange flesh, but for those looking for something different, sweet potatoes can be found with white, yellow, and even purple flesh. Rule number 1 when growing sweet potatoes is to give them enough room to run. Once the warm weather hits, the vigorous vines cover a sizable area. I planted 12 slips in a 6 by 15 foot bed, and they still rambled into neighboring beds and out into the lawn area. While potatoes are started with pieces of the actual tuber, sweet potatoes are started from slips, which are basically cuttings off a mother plant with a small amount of root and a few leaves. The sweet potatoes that we eat are the plant's tuberous roots. Being of southern origin, sweet potatoes can take the heat and even some drought, and need to be grown in a sunny site with well-draining soil. If your soil is on the sandy side, so much the better, as well-aerated soils promote the formation of more roots. I grow them in a slightly raised bed, but have seen directions for creating small mounds to grow them in if your soil is rocky or compacted. Not many garden centers carry edible sweet potato slips or plants, so your best bet would be to order them from a seed or plant company online. Order early, like in January, to ensure you get the variety you want. A dozen slips will easily feed a family of 4, and usually that is the smallest amount one can order. When the slips come in, place them in a container of water for a day or 2 to hydrate them before planting. Ideally, they should be planted 3 or 4 weeks after the last spring frost or when the soils warms up to 65 degrees F. Plant the slips deep enough to cover the roots, usually 6 inches deep or so. Space plants about 30 inches apart to allow plenty of room for tuberous root formation. Plants could be watered in with a high phosphorus liquid fertilizer. Keep them moist for the first 2 weeks to ensure good root establishment. After that, water when the soil dries out and no rain is predicted. Avoid planting in soils that have recently had manure added. Do not over-fertilize with nitrogen, as plants may produce lots of foliage and not a lot of sweet potatoes. Harvest after the frost starts to blacken the foliage. Cut back the vines and gingerly start digging with the trowel or small shovel about 18 inches from plant crowns. The crowns can be tugged upon, and if the soil is loose, where the sweet potatoes are is often obvious, and they can be removed from the soil.